This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of our investment group, and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a distinguished guest. His name is Mr. Rajendra Shende. He's the chairman of TER Policy Center in India, which is a nonprofit think tank and action forum, and he's a former director at United Nations Environment Program. He's also on the board of MIT World Peace University in India, and he's a leading expert for transfer and development of the sustainable technologies and policies. Thank you for coming to our show. It's wonderful to see you, and thank you for taking time to talk to us and shed some bright lights on some of the things that you're doing uh, with the sustainable environment and also with the what you're doing with the United Nations Environment Program. So I wanted to talk to you. You're not only the director of the United Nations Environment Program, but you're also a recipient of the Shared Nobel Prize citation for your work. Please share with our global audience on your work.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Nice to talk to Washington, D.C., which is a center of gravity of all excitement that is happening in the world. Uh, well, I was in the United Nations Environment Program in a Paris office for nearly 2 decades. And one of my important work there was helping the developing countries, there are about 146 of them, to comply with the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer.
Okay,
We today, in all these excitements of climate change and various other environmental degradation, we have forgotten that there was something called as ozone layer, which has been saved after the
yes,
efforts of the United Nations, the world
right,
community, the industry, and governments. But that was one of the rare success stories where I had a contribution in terms of assisting the developing countries. So I was the global head for what is called as a enabling program, the capacity building program, was delivered by United Nations Environment. So that was the basic activity that I did in United Nations program, and the relation of that with the IPCC in 2007, which won the Nobel Peace Prize, along with Al Gore, is that there is a
right.
relation between ozone layer depletion and the climate change. And I was the coordinating lead for between ozone layer depletion and the climate change.
Okay,
It was regarding because of the was a part of the what is called as a winning the peace prize, Nobel Peace Prize. But that was not the only thing. I think it won the Nobel Peace Prize for many other things related to climate change. But one of the things was the interaction between ozone layer and the climate change, and I was
correct.
leading it. So I was sort of uh, a shareholder of citation that was given for Nobel Peace Prize. So that's how
Okay,
it worked. Yeah.
okay. So before I ask you a question about your policy center in India, is the correct name is TER, TERRE, correct?
That's correct. Correct. It is a
Okay,
French
and
word.
I wanted to ask you, what do you do? What's the mission, the goals, and objective is? Before I ask you that question, you pose a very uh, good questions about the climate change. So climate change is real. It's not hoax, as Trump said many times. So what kind of things that needs to be done in India in order to reduce the ozone layers and many other activities that India has that can help, especially the farmers are burning a lot of wood and things like that. That also creates a lot of problem. As a result, the when I India's Republic Day parade, we could not breathe the air. So tell us a little bit about how do you reduce it? How do you make sure that people can be about the policy? I'm asking a long question, but I would hope you can shed some light on it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Frank. Yeah, if I may start, there was some kind of an breaking of your voice, but I could
Oh,
get
okay.
the crux of your question well. If you are
Okay.
not able to hear me because of some disturbance in the network,
Yes.
please signal it. But
Yeah,
I got your question very well.
we still have a problem in hearing you, Mr. Shandy. So please make sure that we will try to edit it. So you're okay. Go ahead.
Okay, fine, fine. Well, there is a very close relationship between a climate change and the air pollution. There is no doubt about it. Frankly speaking, if I may describe uh, my work in United Nations in a more, what you call it, candid way, I was heading the successful program of ozone layer protection. But because after the success in ozone layer, we started working on a climate change, which was extremely unsuccessful program. And so I had a distinction of working on a success as well as a failure. So that is a very important thing. And the failure had a multi-direction and multi-dimension, as you correctly pointed out. Because of the climate change, it's not only the global warming, but what we normally overlook is the air pollution.
Correct.
The burning of the fossil fuel, no
Right.
doubt, creates a global
Contributes to
warming.
that.
But before
Right.
it creates a global warming, we have what is called as a air pollution, which directly affects the civilization, particularly children, women, and many other workers and those who are weaker section of the society. And
Right.
this is very important to understand it because the air pollution is sort of an spread all over the world. It is not only in Delhi, frankly speaking. Maybe Delhi it is much more as it is in a Beijing. And that is
Right.
because of the various parameters that play a part,
Correct.
including the geographical location of Delhi, but also the sort of a mismanagement of the transport sector, the mismanagement of the agricultural residue burning, the mismanagement of the construction activities which do not go ahead as per the standards, and in general, the apathy for taking the early action. It's very important. This is where the again I come back to the ozone layer protection, that the early action that we took helped us in getting to the success, that we are now on the path of recovering the ozone layer. Whereas because we are not taking any early action, and as you said, we still call it hoax, and even at the highest level of the world leaders, that means no early action, and then we are
Right.
precipitating the problem to the very high level. That's my reaction to whatever your question.
Well, very nice. Tell us a little bit about your this policy center that you had. What's the missions and objectives are?
Right. So when Frank, my life on United Nations is was over as a global head capacity building program of the developing countries.
Right.
One thing I learned very fast is that the ozone is only one of the problems. And it is important that we need to involve the communities to work at the local level to take action of the global challenges.
Very well said.
So it's the global challenge and the local action. And then I decided
Right.
that I start what is called as a not-for-profit organization in based in India as well as in Paris, because that's where I lived for 20 years, and start working on a major challenges with action in local people, with the local communities. Terre is a French word, Terre, which
Oh,
means
okay.
earth, which
Oh,
means
okay.
earth.
Well, thank
And
you.
it is sort of a, and it is sort of a gimmick also, because it is an abbreviation of technology, education, research, and rehabilitation for environment. So
So that's what it
it is
stands
the
for.
both. Right, that's what it stands for. You're right, exactly, you got it. So the main approach for this, there are many not-for-profit organizations working at the local level, but our approach in there is to work with the communities to pass the message at the audience which will take the action. It is based on action. It is not based on just awareness. And if at all we create awareness, it is action-oriented awareness.
And
Just to
what
give you an
sort of
example.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
That's what
go ahead.
I was asking you. Okay.
Okay. Right, right. For example, we have a one project works with the community, which is defined as a community of the university students and the faculty.
Okay.
And we have these sustainable development goals of United Nations, which were
Okay.
finalized and accepted by all the countries in 2015. And their implementation started from 1st January 2016. And those SDGs, there are 17 of them, are related to a number of issues, starting from the poverty eradication to the partnerships, clean energy, water conservation, etc., etc. Now, of course, the one thing is to make people aware of these sustainable development goals. But another thing is start implementing them. And what we thought in there is that there is a community of the campus in universities who can really start acting. And we defined that their activity domain is their campus. And whatever they do in the campus should be linked to the G's. And that way, what happens is they learn while doing it. And they share their activity in a dashboard. They monitor their activity with the modern technology like Internet of Things. And then that's how it works. So that is an example of how to work with communities. But we also work with the rural communities. We work with the farmers, women's, but it's basically community-based action programs.
Very well, very well. It's a good stuff, and I think you're doing the right thing in order to promote what's needed to change in terms of the climate change. So they understand what is at stake, and I think that's
Mhm.
probably the challenge that we all have. As I understand, you also serve as an advisor to Media India Group in France, engaged in enhancing cooperations between India and Europe on environmental protection. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's good that, Frank, you are asking this question, because when we today talk about cooperation between the countries or cooperation between the region and the countries, we normally talk about trade. We,
And
we
that is
talk about
true. That is
trade
true.
agreements. We about
Commerce, trade, and
right,
talk about
right,
how to you know how to improve the trade so that that's an important aspect. You're absolutely right. We don't talk about the
right.
environment. You're absolutely
And
right.
and and I'm very happy that you asked the question about what kind of environmental cooperation which goes on, which means, Frank, that when you as a American look at the Europe, first thing comes to your mind is the environmental issues, and
Yes.
which is not true with the North America as of today. And you are perfectly right that India's cooperation with Europe is based on environmental foundation. I mean, let's look at the nuclear energy, where France and India cooperated. I mean, nuclear energy represents the response to the climate change. And look at the International Solar Alliance between India and France, and now it is becoming a global. And this is also one of the what is called as a path breaking, and which disrupts the international cooperation in a different way. And we have another one which talks about agricultural cooperation. I mean, Europe, particularly Spain and France, they represent the agricultural innovations. I mean, the way the modern technologies are being now utilized by the farmers, it is a perfect to be to be having a cooperation with the Indian farmers, where you require those technologies to minimize your water consumption, to use the right kind of seeds, to understand what the climate is and how it is changing, and can be understood only with the modern technologies. And India and France are doing those kind of things, and same thing is true for Spain and Germany. So the cooperation is growing, and our role of Media India is to promote those kind of acts. The organic food, for example, the Germany, which is a leading country for that, and India is
right?
picking up very, very fast. And
Co-
I have my own farmers in my village, which is in the Satara district, where they are getting into clubs and calling it organic clubs, and they started understanding the issues that we may get benefit of the normal farming, standard farming, immediate, but in the long term, the land degradation and the pollution that you are carrying into the rivers is going to
right.
affect our future generation, and
Very
that is
well
what is
said.
happening. Yeah.
Uh, but one of the challenges that the farmer face, that's not something you have to uh, say about the climate change thing, is they cannot get their product because they don't have infrastructure to the market. As a result, it rots, and that probably they throw them in the river or somewhere else, and they don't bury them. As a result, it also creates a in terms of a challenge for the climate change. Am I correct to assume that, Rajendra?
Very true, Frank. That's very true. I think what is happening is they throw the products in waste for
Yeah,
reason that suddenly the supply grows and
that
there
is
is no
correct.
market for that. That's number one.
Right.
Number two is
Yeah,
suddenly his crop falls down because of the degradation. I mean, this is what is happening even today. There is a heavy rain and a thunderstorm in some part of the UP and northern Madhya Pradesh, where farmers are just left with nothing, and their crops of potato and whatever they have planted is just gone waste. And we really don't know what these farmers are going to do. And and also the waste is, you said in the beginning that there is no proper way of taking the product to the marketplace. And it's a well documented that nearly 30% of the India's produce goes waste because the supply logistics is inadequate. And one of the part of the supply logistic is not only the transport network, but also the refrigerated containers.
you got
And
it. Very well said.
yeah, right. And because there's a hot, the perishable products get damaged very fast. So you need to work cold storages across the supply chain, and I think it's a huge challenge. And sometimes the Indian government is trying to find out the easy way out, and that is just put the money in a bank account of the farmer. I don't think
That
that is going
doesn't
to solve
help.
the problem. I think you are, yeah,
Right.
you have to empower. You have to empower not only the farmers, but you have to empower the system, the the
Right.
organized way of producing and selling it. Whereas the easy way out, maybe for votes purposes or politics of it, you are just dumping the money into their pockets, which farmers even don't know how to use them.
So tell us a little bit about your global flagship program that you have on the Smart Campus. You talked a little bit about that, UN
Right.
Sustainable Development Programs, and tell us this, why the sustainable development can contribute to the healthy and peaceful societies. You shed light a little bit, but can you expand a little bit more?
Yes. Yes. Frank, I think the the link between sustainable development and the peace in the world is now well understood by the governments as well as business community. If you have a violent society, unstable society, for whatever the reason, because of the climate change, because of the politics, because of the caste, religion, or border issues, or whatever it may be, then the business will not work in a sustainable way. So, business knows very well that there has to be a stable society in order to make the profits and sustain profits. So there is no doubt that the development which has to take place should not result into the conflicts. And one of the conflicts for such kind of thing is sharing of the resources in a fair way. And that is not happening. Today, what we say is the superpowers, so-called superpowers, without naming them, they have a proportion of consumption much
Yes.
higher than some of the
Yes.
poor
Yes.
countries. So there
True.
is a conflict. There is a conflict of resource sharing. And
Right.
that is because the kind of economics principles that we use. And that's what the Sustainable Development Program is very important. I mean, these 17 goals which I talked about, they also include sustainable resource consumption and production.
Very well
And
said.
those kind of concepts, those concepts are extremely difficult to follow and very easy to talk about. And hence, it is important that today's youth, I'm talking about 16 years to 20 years or 25 years, that youth, if they have to understand what this sustainable development is, they better spend time in their campus to follow it. Because I consider campus, Frank, is the laboratory of career. I consider campus is a pilot plant for the sustainable development. So if they try to have the energy conservation in a campus, water saving in a campus, if they have a waste minimization in a campus, they have a carbon neutral campus, zero emission campus,
Very well said.
sustainable transport within a campus, I think those are the values that will be ingrained in their minds, which they will forward in their professional career. And this is what we
That's
need
a
to
very,
do.
you're absolutely right. I know you just mentioned about you have been advocate of the low carbon economy, right? You mentioned that.
Right.
Do you believe it
Right.
can help India achieve the goal of a $5 trillion economy by 2030 as promoted by the Prime Minister? Or
I, Frank, I strongly believe so. And I have written an analysis of it. And our friend Tarun Basu, he has published it very prominently. The
okay,
5 trillion economy today, Frank, there are a lot of research going that how the action on climate change would result to and put the world into an orbit of high growth. So
okay,
if any world leader in North America is thinking about climate change is the hoax and the climate change is something promoted by the China or something in order to suppress some of the other people, I think it is a wrong concept. The solar energy, for example, which will cut down our fossil fuel consumption,
correct.
that solar energy, there are reports which will put you into the trajectory of economic growth
Very well
because
said.
it is becoming accessible to the poorest of the poor now. The
Right.
costs of production of solar energy are falling down to such a level that it is even cheaper than a fossil fuel, which
True.
means that the poorest of the poor people will be able to use solar energy and they will be the tomorrow's business people who will start making their small businesses in a big way. Today in India, let's take India, because you asked the question specific to India and 5 trillion economy. The SME sector, Frank, contributes 80% of the GDP of India.
So that's a
It
small,
varies between
medium
6,
enterprise. Right.
right. The figure
In the
varies
United
between
States, it's about
80.
90%. In 90% of the economy in the United States dependent on small business.
Right. That's it. That's it. And the solar energy is such that it is extremely suitable for the small business.
Yes.
I don't believe I don't believe in a large solar farms. I think we need to have what is called as a off-grid, decentralized energy production. I
Oh,
think
okay.
we are carrying a hangover of 18th century and 19th century to build the large plants, the large hydraulic dams, the large thermal power plants. And I think we have to give up that.
That's
You
very
have to
well said.
empower the small and medium industry so that they become what is called as a business drivers into the world and not the few dynasties of the world. So once you do that, then I think nobody can stop you for going towards the 5 trillion economy. And the same is true for the farmers. Today farmers are neglected, and particularly in India, because there are economists and economic advisors which say, oh, they only contribute 16% of the total GDP, and they are 60%, they are most unproductive. Question is, they have been made unproductive because the system that you are following. They can be most productive and contribute to this 5 trillion economy if you make your system productive, and the farmers will just follow that. So I strongly
Very well said.
believe that 5 trillion economy is a feasible, is within the reach, and there has to be cooperation. When we go back to the India and Europe, there's also collaboration between India and USA. But I think the like-minded people, I mean, forget about the criticism made on USA on climate change. But your more than 20 states are decided that whatever the federal government says, we will follow the Paris Agreement. So those are the like-minded people, and the Democrats, they have to now join the hands with India and China to get this into the economic trajectory.
Very well said. And so before we close our conversation, do you have anything to share with our audience? Anything else?
Uh, well, I think, well, lot to share. I know the time is very limited, Frank,
Yeah, the
but
time is limited.
one thing I want to stress is what is called
Okay.
as a partnership. Partnership. And this is a famous saying that if you want to reach the destination fast,
Yes,
you go alone.
you
But
go
if you
alone.
want to reach far, you make a collective work. And the
We
audience probably should learn
very
that we
well
need
said.
to get together on a like-minded activities
Very
in
well said.
order to achieve our sustainable development goals.
Very
So,
well said.
Frank, to close the my response to your question, I would say the university communities, the young people, they should have a partnership. Today, they have just exchange programs and a cooperation on thesis and the research. I think they should cooperate on sustainable development and the climate change, climate neutrality, and the world will change.
Well, thank you very much. I think that our millennials, as you said, they
Mhm.
are the hope for tomorrow. It's
That's
important for
correct.
them to infuse and instill in them a sense of belonging, so they understand why it is important to have a climate change. It's important to make sure that the well, forget what the United States says, and this administration, hopefully, we'll have a new administration soon, but that's me.
Okay.
But but we need to work together. I totally agree. A global interconnectivity is very, very important key ingredient of a success. We cannot do, as
Well
President
said.
Obama said many times, by ourselves. We need people who can work with us, and so that because we have a similar types of problems and challenges that you have and everywhere else we have. So thank
Mhm.
you very, very much for your time, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for all you do to make a profound difference. And this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.